Good morning and welcome to the Delvin Estuary here at Gormanston in County Meath. My name is Brendan Matthews, Social and Community Historian, and over the next few minutes I'd like to present to you an overview of the storied past regarding the history and heritage of Gormanston and the surrounding area. The Delvin River here behind me begins its life just over 23 kilometres to the southwest of here, and for its entire journey it separates the counties of Meath and Fingal in County Dublin, and it empties into the Irish Sea here at Gormanston. On the north bank of the river I'm in Gormanston in County Meath. On the south bank is Knocknagin in County Dublin or in Fingal. The land extended here by as much as 1 kilometre just over 5,000 years ago, when the first Neolithic or New Stone Age settlers and farmers arrived from the Iberian Peninsula. And on either side of the Delvin River estuary there can be seen the remains of numerous burial tombs which predate the great tombs of the Boyne Valley of Newgrange Nouth and Doubt, which is situated just over 20 kilometres to the northwest of here. These people arrived and settled here, were the first farmers on the landscape here, the first people to settle here, and they began to trade up and down the coast and trade over and back to places such as Wales and Cornwall. Ptolemy's map, the Greek from Alexandria, there's a map of Ireland dating to the 2nd century AD, and there's a port indicated on that map here at Gormanston. We also find that in the Annals of Armagh by Bishop Tyrconnell and Bishop Murclú, in writing in the 680s and the 690s, so the late 7th century, both of them in their annals record in the Book of Armagh that early Christian missionaries, St. Patrick, had landed here at the Delvin Estuary. That's backed up by a number of other documentation in Armagh, and also by local place names, dedicated wells. Not only the national apostle, but he's also the patron saint of Gormanston, which is within the parish of Stamullen. There's also much Viking influence in this area. Again, in the place names, remnants of Viking activity, battlements and encounters. And also, the Delvin River estuary was the northern limits of the territory of the Viking tribe known as the Fingal, which the southern side of the Delvin estuary is named after. The name Gormanston comes from the O'Gorman family, and they were chieftains here just before the arrival of the Normans. Across the country of Ireland there are 10 place names named Gormanston. This one here is a little bit different in that we don't use the W in the name of Gormanston, but it's Gormanston, an old English name. An old English comes from the Saxon language, ton and town meaning the same thing, of a settlement. The O'Gorman family were here, and with the coming of the Normans, the arrival of the Normans in the late 12th century, of course, land was acquired, and we find that the O'Gorman family are now being dispossessed from their land in exactly the year 1225, 1226, and they're dispossessed by a family called de Saint-Amand, a powerful Norman family from northern France who were first found in England following the Battle of Hastings in 1066. This Saint-Amand family, also members of that family, were founders of the infamous Knights Templars. They settled here at Gormanston, and they remained at Gormanston until just after the mid-14th century, in the year 1361, when the Preston family from Preston in Lancashire in England, they come over and they take over possession of the household of the Saint-Amand family here at Gormanston. The Normans arrive in the late 12th century, and by the early 13th century they're here at Gormanston with the Amand family, and like I said, the Prestons take over then in the year 1361. The Preston family were also a powerful family from northern England. They first settled in Drogheda, and they found in Drogheda before moving out to Gormanston, where in the town of Drogheda the Prestons actually own something like 63 or 64 commercial premises in the town of Drogheda. They move out here 1361 to 1363, Robert de Preston, and the Preston family become the premier Viscounts of all of Ireland, which is bestowed on them by King Edward IV in the year 1478. The Prestons remained here throughout the whole centuries, very dedicated and with allegiance to the Crown of England, except for when it comes to the 17th century, the bloodiest century in our history here in Ireland, where we have the War of the Three Kingdoms between England, Scotland and Ireland. And at this point, the Viscount, the 6th Viscount Gormanston, Nicholas Preston, he takes sides with the native Irish and the Irish rebels on the Catholic side. And so begins the Irish Rebellion of 1641. The Prestons lose possession of their title of Viscount after this encounter, and they also lose much of their lands, but they are allowed stay in their home, which is the manor house of Gormanston. These titles are restored to the Preston family only in the year 1800 by King George III, and he restores the title to Jenico Preston, who then sits with the Viscount chair, and he becomes the 12th Viscount of Gormanston. It is after this Jenico Preston is sold comes the event known as the Foxes of Gormanston, a legendary tale that when one of the household of the Preston family passes away at Gormanston Castle, the foxes gather round and they remain at the doorstep howling and crying for the master until the Lord Gormanston is buried in the nearby Preston tomb in Stamullen village. It's also at this time that this Jenico Preston, the 12th Viscount, builds the actual castle at Gormanston, which we are very familiar with today. He begins building the castle in the mid-1790s, and by the 1820s the castle is finished, or rather he abruptly stops building anymore because his wife passes away, and in his diary he exclaims, "The light of my life has left me today." And hence, when you approach Gormanston Castle from the eastern side, it looks very much different than from the western end of the castle. We move on then throughout this 19th century period, and we have the railway coming. So you have the Industrial Revolution, the machine age as they call it in the later 18th century, and by the mid-19th century, of course, there's railway lines being laid across much of Ireland. And here at Gormanston, of course, we find that the railway passes through. It's constructed between 1840 and it opens in 1844. And of course we have the railway station here at Gormanston, very unique in the fact that from Wicklow to the boundary with Northern Ireland beyond Dundalk, that it's the most isolated train station in the country. When it comes to the early 19th century, we also find that on the northern end of Gormanston Beach, the British Army takes over something like 200 acres or thereabouts to install a new British Army barracks. First it becomes an Air Corps station, and then it becomes the British Army barracks. It opened just almost coming up to the end of the First World War at the November of 1918, and the barracks actually opens around about this time. So the First World War is just over when the barracks opens. The British vacate the barracks in 1922, where it was a demobilisation barracks for the disbandment of the Royal Irish Constabulary and also the infamous Black and Tans and auxiliaries who had been stationed there. It then becomes a Republican internment camp during the Irish Civil War, and the last of the Republican prisoners leave Gormanston camp by special train for the Curragh in early December of 1923. It becomes an Irish Free State barracks in the early Free State by the mid-1920s. First of all going to be taken over by Henry Ford, who had settled in Cork with his Ford Motor Company, and it was thought then around late 1922 with negotiations with the Irish government that Henry Ford might establish a plant here at Gormanston, it being close to Dublin and here on the east coast, closer to Dublin than his plant at Cork. That never went to happen, and so began the Irish Army barracks here at Gormanston. It's of interest then when it comes to the later 20th century, what we find here in Gormanston is that Gormanston campus again being used as a refugee centre, and it's been used in 1971 with massive amount of people who are leaving Northern Ireland as a result of the Troubles, which began in 1969, and by August 1971 there's about 6,000 people in Gormanston camp, numerous families, particularly from the Belfast area, who are then being rehoused around the country as a result of the Troubles in the north. Some of them who came to Gormanston actually went back within 24 or 48 hours back to Belfast. We move on then through the mid-1970s, and we find that here at Gormanston that there's unfortunately there's a train crash, a runaway train with no driver, leaves Dublin on a morning in October 1974, and it ploughs into a stationary train here at the station in Gormanston. 2 people unfortunately lose their lives, and a number of people are injured as a result. And this brings us up now to the modern era of the 21st century, the new millennium in which we live. And we find that we'd love to highlight this history of Gormanston, this storied past of our history and heritage pertaining to the whole area. And what we find is that we have a massive storied past. We have a story to tell here from the Neolithic, from the arrival of the first settlers, the first farmers into Ireland, following the hunter-gatherer people. And we find that from that period on, we move through the Bronze Age. We've got Bronze Age monuments here at Gormanston. We've got Iron Age sites. We've got place names, fascinating place names, right here along the Delvin River, such as Glen Sesknan, the Valley of the Marshy Ground, Leg Dury, the Hollowed Oak Grove, which is immediately and directly pertaining to the Druidic system of pagan Ireland. We've got Knocknagin, the Hill on the Head, which is almost certainly referring to a passage tomb which overlooked the actual Delvin estuary here. And we've got numerous medieval traits. We've got Oliver Cromwell, who passed through the area and who actually his army of 20,000 men encamped at Gormanston before their arrival and their attack in Gormanston in the 17th century. We've got the penal days of the 18th century and much to do with Gormanston. We've got the Preston family of Gormanston Castle, and they left us behind a wealth of material pertaining to the history of the area, particularly throughout the whole history here. So the Prestons were here from 1361, and they remained here till 1947, and they left us with a wealth of material, documentation for the history of Gormanston. And then today we are left with people who can give us oral tales on the history and heritage of our beloved Gormanston here on the east coast of Ireland. My name is Brendan Matthews, Social and Community Historian. Thank you.